Here we go. Oh, where's the music? Here we go. And welcome to another edition of the Double A Team. My name is Stephen Nagishi, and we're very happy to have Ken Fang back on our airwaves again. Ken, I hope you've been doing well. I know you had a little bit of a health scare and everything,
Yeah.
but very happy to have you on. And
Well, when your doctor calls and tells you how you have kidney failure and you get to go to the hospital right away, you go to the hospital right away. So that was last month, and then right before the last show, I got a migraine. So my apologies to you and Aldo about bailing at the last minute for the last show. But the very first show, I was recovering from kidney failure and not in quite shape to do the show, and I'm in better shape now. So after I've lost 35 pounds, so much better shape, and well, not so much better shape, but let's just put it this way. I'm doing better than I was this time last month. So
yes,
I'm happy to be with you, Stephen, and ready to go. And let's continue this show throughout the summer.
I'm glad to hear that you're doing much better. I know you went through so much, with the kidney and then the migraine in our previous show. And, you look good. You look good. And, we're very, very happy that, hopefully you also had a wonderful 4th of July yourself, Ken.
Well, it was, I worked the 4th of July holiday. I was at my other job, but, it's not bad getting paid if you have to work the holiday. So nothing wrong with that. Stephen, who do we have for our guest for tonight?
All right. So we have tonight. One is Ken Sugiura, who is the football. I think I should say he covers Georgia Tech primarily for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I've followed his work when I used to live in the Atlanta area. So I reached out to him, and he was kind enough to give us our time to discuss about the upcoming CFB and also the big news regarding the college football last week or even the week before when USC and UCLA, two West powerhouses from Pac-12, announces that they are leaving to join. Get this, Ken, Big 12, which is somewhat unheard of. It's unbelievable. Where the college football is heading right now. It's unbelievable. Forget about the conferences, the time zones, the rivalries. It's just basically right now at this point, SEC and the Big 12 are competing against one another to expand the conference, form a major conference, maybe 20-team conference. Who knows where it's going to end? And I'm very, very curious to see where this is all going, and who's going to stay, who's going to go, and it's basically winner take all at the moment.
And, it's going to see who's going to be able to get. It's all about the money. UCLA and USC were not going to get as much money from the Pac-12, and the media rights negotiations have just begun. But they knew they were going to get $100 million at least a year annually from the Big Ten, especially now that they're going to have a new media contract, and that's going to be decided very soon. We expected those of us who have been following in sports media about the Big Ten were expecting the contract to be finalized right now. But now that USC and UCLA are coming in, they get another big market. Now, the Big Ten, of course, has Chicago and Minneapolis, and they have Cleveland, and they have the Ohio market, Columbus, and they also have, basically, and they have all these big, huge markets in the Midwest. Now they have the second largest market in Los Angeles. CBS wants part of it. We know Fox already has half of the contract because that's been settled. They have Big Ten Network. ESPN still wants in. NBC wants in. Apple called them and said, "Oh, let's go back and talk to you again." And also Amazon wants in. So one of these, it's going to be pretty amazing to see what's going to happen. We expect that resolution of the contract coming up probably at the end of next month, Stephen. So once that happens, I wouldn't be surprised to see some more dominoes fall from the Pac-12. Maybe Oregon and Washington petition the Big Ten to join because they don't want to be part of a sinking ship with the Pac-12. The Big 12 may want to, and the Pac-12 may want to get together and swallow up each other. I know the Big 12 is thinking of taking in the Arizona schools and Utah and Colorado. So that leaves the Pac-12 with not much. So we'll see what happens. And of course, the Pac-12 and signed an alliance with the ACC. And we'll talk with Ken about that when it comes up in the next segment too.
Absolutely, and we're excited to welcome the Georgia Tech writer for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Ken Sugiura, joining us on the show. Ken, how you doing? Thanks for joining us tonight on short notice.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Stephen. Thank you for having me on, and Ken too. It's I'm actually on sort of on vacation, our last bit of freedom before football starts, but yeah, I'm happy to join you guys. Thanks for inviting me.
Ken,
thank you for joining us. Oh, sorry about that, Ken.
Yep. So, Ken, let's talk about that. We were just discussing, and of course, Georgia Tech, where you, and of course, part of, and Georgia, of course, a big market for football. Georgia Tech, of course, Georgia's part of the SEC. Georgia Tech, part of the ACC. And we just discussed some of the things going on with the machinations between the what's going on with college football. Where does it stand? Where does Georgia Tech stand with looking at? Are they basically on the outside looking in at this point?
That's a tough one. I think what I think for Georgia Tech and really for any of the ACC schools right now, I think the big kind of issue, I guess, is that they have all the league, all the schools in the league signed a grant of rights. I think it was about 10 years ago. That and I'm sure it sounds like you know all about it, but it basically is committed all the schools to each other, to the conference, and if they were to try to leave, they'd have to sacrifice, their media rights revenue, which makes it really, really difficult for them to leave. So it was at a point in time, about 10 years ago when, it was thought that maybe the SEC was going to come after Florida State or somebody. Georgia Tech was rumored that they might go to the Big Ten at that point. And so there was a moment of, hey, let's stick together. And so they signed this grant of rights. And so it makes it really difficult, I think, for any of those schools to leave the ACC for the next, I guess, 13, 14 years. The penalty lessens over time, I think. But yeah, so with Georgia Tech and all those other schools, I think they're at a point of, I think maybe privately of, is this the right league, and would we be better served in the SEC or the Big Ten? And in a lot of ways, you can make a very good argument that they would be, but the difficulty is, is getting out of the grant of rights and deciding that they do want to strike out on their own and leave the ACC. I think it's a conference that I think all the member schools, I obviously can't speak for them, but I think they've all felt that that's where they belong, and there's a really good fit there. But yeah, obviously things are changing very drastically, and so I don't know if I'm entirely answering your question, but yeah, it's a tough spot for all the schools in the conference.
Right. Yeah, ESPN has a big say, of course, with the ACC, with the ACC network contract that runs through 2036. So it may be difficult for some of these ACC schools to leave, but even so, a contract is a contract and can be broken at any time. And we know that money can speak. And if the SEC comes calling, there's going to be some schools that'll want to bolt. But you cover the ACC quite extensively, Ken. So, we know that the ACC, at least in some form, has to stay together at least through 2036. They get a lot of money from ESPN. But can ESPN just say that maybe break this contract and say maybe, hey, look, if you guys want to join the SEC, which we also own too, come on over.
Right. As I understand it, I think the ACC contract with the ACC network with ESPN is separate from the grant rights. But regardless, yeah, as you say, I think television revenue counts for a lot, and those, the wishes of those conferences, the networks count for a lot. So if it were to come to that, yeah, maybe they could make it happen somehow. ESPN saying, hey, we'll cover, hey, school X, we'll make this happen for you. So I guess it's conceivable, like you say. I think, they are contracts and they can be broken. And I'm sure lawyers have been looking very closely at if there's an out or how do we do this or whatnot. But yeah, it's, a friend of mine who covers the ACC for ESPN, David Hale, made a point that, I suppose you could get out of it, but it's been 10 years or so now, and no one's tried to do that. So it must say something about the strength of that contract. And for instance, then he brought up also Texas and Oklahoma that they also could conceivably have gotten out of the grant of rights with the Big 12, but they're going to wait it out, presumably because getting out of it would be really, really sticky. So I guess it's possible, but it's from certainly what I read and what I gather, it would be really, really difficult.
From what I've been hearing, Notre Dame, they're being heavily courted by the ACC. How much of a pull do you think ACC has when it comes to attracting Notre Dame? Which, by the way, they're not desperate, but the name brand Notre Dame alone will obviously make any conference really, really good, whether it be SEC, ACC, or even the Big Ten for that matter. But how devastating would it be for Notre Dame to spurn ACC and go elsewhere? And would that spell the end for ACC?
I don't know specifically that. I mean, I think to go back to we were talking about before, I think the grant of rights could conceivably hold them for better or worse, through the next decade, whether they have Notre Dame or not. But yeah, it'd be a difficult thing for league to overcome. I would wonder if the ACC, if Notre Dame were to leave, if ESPN would come back and say, hey, we made this deal with you guys with, Notre Dame playing the 5 games against ACC teams annually. And if that is no longer part of the deal, then, I guess the appeal of the ACC network or the contract of what the ACC is offering is certainly different. So yeah, I think if the ACC could somehow hold on to the Notre Dame, and I'm sure their ideal scenario would be for for Notre Dame to commit to playing in the conference as a football member, which I don't foresee happening. But if that were to happen, that would change. I think that would really it would give them a lot more I guess leverage, and you've got one of the biggest names now on board with you as a conference member. But if they were to go to the Big Ten or just to say somehow disengage entirely, yeah, that would be a really tough break for the conference.
Mm-hmm.
We're speaking with Ken Sugiura of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, covers the ACC and Georgia Tech for that newspaper and that website. Ken, you've covered the ACC for quite some time, and you've seen these changes come about.
Right.
What are some of the things that of course, some people yearn for the simpler days when ACC was there and the SEC was there, and the Big 10 and 12 would and the train will no longer meet. But now that all this money is coming into play, I mean, you see this upheaval almost every year. What is it like for you as a reporter to try and make sense of all of this?
It's not easy, but it's interesting. I think what struck me this year was, up until this year, to an extent at least, Rutgers and Maryland joining the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
You can make the case, well, contiguous states, Pennsylvania's connected to New Jersey and Maryland, and when I guess Nebraska is, I look really bad here, but Nebraska is in the Midwest with, obviously the rest of the Big Ten, and Notre Dame obviously was kind of a strange piece with the ACC, and because it's not obviously near any coast. I saw like Michigan, but at least they were kind of like-minded schools and in the same time zone. And even with Texas and Oklahoma, you're like, okay, they're again like-minded schools, more or less in the same region, not entirely, but for USC and UCLA, to join the Big Ten. I mean, no one needs to have that explained to them, and just how kind of upside down that is. When they're in rival conferences, and one of the most long-standing traditions of college athletics, the Rose Bowl, has been, the Big Ten coming out there to play in the Rose Bowl against often one of those two schools. And so that, to me, it sort of felt like, wow, we've crossed a barrier, I guess, or a threshold that we've really can't go back to anymore. So it is funny. I mean, I think anyone who covers college sports, one of the traditions and the history is one of the great things that makes it different than covering the NFL or a professional league. And so to lose some of that, I don't know if sad's the right word, but it definitely changes the way it feels and the way you kind of look at it, I think.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with Ken Sugiura, who covers the Georgia Tech from Atlanta Journal-Constitution, joining us on the AA team tonight. Ken, I was in Pittsburgh over the holiday, and I was listening to the local radio station, 93.7 The Fan, and they were talking about the realignment. Obviously, from their perspective, they had the Penn State, Pitt, and then also West Virginia nearby. And one of the hosts, I forgot whose name was, threw out a crazy scenario on what if SEC extends invitations to, not just, Clemson, Miami, the nearby schools, but for example, Ohio State and Michigan, to really, put a monkey wrench into the Big Ten's, plan, versus the SEC and et cetera, et cetera. I'm wondering, from your experience covering, college sports, how many conferences do you honestly think we're going to see in the coming years, and how many teams are going to be? Are we we're looking at what, 24 team conferences? Where you have like a European soccer style, promotion, relegation, or et cetera, et cetera. What is the craziest scenario you can think of? And they're talking about Vanderbilt being kicked out of SEC, because obviously, the athletics just aren't there, especially football and basketball. They've done very well in baseball, and then, crazy scenario, they replace, Vanderbilt with Georgia Tech, because obviously they're situated in Atlanta,
right?
And there's a natural rivalry already there with Georgia that won the national title, and then is already surrounded by the SEC schools in Alabama, Auburn, and then nearby, and then also Mississippi. What are the scenarios like that ever happening, in your opinion?
Boys, what's kind of the wildest scenario that I can conceive of? Is that what you're?
Yes. What's the craziest scenario you can think of, and where does put Georgia Tech in there?
Oh, that would include Georgia Tech?
Yes.
I mean, I think the way that, I think for the SEC, I think it's one of those things that I forget where I heard this, but if maybe it gets to a point where the SEC and Big Ten are just kind of in competition, and they're just kind of trying to gobble up territory, kind of like you're playing Monopoly, and Georgia Tech would be one of those pieces on the board. And obviously there's more. I think Tech does offer more value. We mentioned the Atlanta market, and certainly, and it was a long time SEC member until left in the mid '60s. But maybe one of those things where, just to make sure that the Big Ten doesn't get a foothold in the state of Georgia, the SEC would go ahead and say, okay, we'll add you too. But also though, I think there's also a reason, because of the Atlanta market, because I'm sure football coaches in the Big Ten would love to be able to tell recruits, hey, in the state of Georgia, hey, we'll come and play, in your state every couple of years or whatever it is, and just to be more of a presence in the Southeast. I could see that being a way that they would want to pick up Tech. Plus, it's an AAU school, and obviously its academics speak for itself. And it's has this football is obviously down, but there's a lot of strong programs within it. So those are, I think those are ways that could happen. Obviously, like to go back to what I was saying, I think the grant of rights is kind of the first hurdle that, any school that's going to try to pick off an ACC school is going to have to cross first or get over first. But yeah, something like that. I mean, I think, there's certainly been a lot of talk about the idea of super conferences of it ended up being just, the ACC, or excuse me, the Big Ten and the SEC. So in that scenario, maybe, both those conferences expand to 2024. I think I would say that all these scenarios being tossed out, they could well come to pass, but I think it's pretty hard to try to figure out what's going to happen 10 years from now, 5 years out. And then it is, even just, given that if you look back 2 or 3 years, even, I don't know that we could have all figured out, with NIL and the portal and all those things, how that we'd be at this point. So it's easy to connect those dots, but yeah, I think there may be something else in the next 5 years that changes everything again. You think of like maybe Miami and Florida State and Clemson return to the heights that they all of school. Well, Clemson is in the top, but if Florida State and Miami get back to where they once were, and there's reason I think that can happen, then maybe that changes kind of the ACC's appeal. So yeah, all that to say, I could envision it happening, but I think a lot of things are going to have to happen before then. That whether they happen or not, we're not sure.
Mm-hmm.
We're speaking with Ken Sugiura of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Let's take a quick break. We have a lot more to discuss with Ken, and then we'll return with the AA team right after this. Steve, when we go to break?
And then put the camera on hold for a little bit if you want to go for a break, sir. Okay. I don't know how to put us into the break, unfortunately.
Okay, so we don't have a promo for that at all?
We're trying to work on that one, man.
Okay.
My apologies there. So
should we just come back then?
We could come back maybe in about 12, maybe in 30 seconds, if that's okay.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to put the camera off, and Ken, you can do that as well for just a moment.
Yeah, normally we have a promo that runs right about now, but I don't know if it's running.
Yes. I'll ask Aldo about the running the promo. So my apologies there.
No problem.
I think he'll help us with that too. So, all right. Ready, Ken?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
Ken's ready.
Okay. My apologies.
Ken's here, so. All right. I'll bring us back. Let me know.
We're good.
Okay. We're back with the AA team, Ken Fang, along with Stephen Negishi. We also have Ken Sugiura here from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. We're talking of college football and what's going on with the latest machinations between the Big Ten, SEC, ACC, Big 12, and the Pac-12. Ken, last week the ACC and the Pac-12 signed basically an agreement, but it was kind of like the agreement that the ACC, Pac-12, and Big Ten had that last year, which they promised not to raid each other, but that of course went by the wayside when the Big Ten accepted USC and UCLA. What do you know about this new particular agreement, and what can this do for the ACC?
I confess I don't know a lot about it. I mean, I'd certainly heard things about, that they were going to look into. I think the ACC is at a point where they're trying to figure out what are our options. What can we do, whether it's with another conference or potentially expanding or going to ESPN or whatever. And so I think it's one of the things where I think a lot of cards are on the table for the conference, and certainly, trying to figure out a way to coexist and move ahead with the Pac-12 might be one of those things. But yeah, so I do think, they're at a point, and we worked on those before, where, they, with the grant of rights way it is, and with the contract with ESPN not being as lucrative as others, I think they're just trying to figure out what's the next best step to ensure our viability going forward.
Yeah, one of the things that was allegedly in that agreement was the potential of a Pac-12 ACC championship game.
Right.
Maybe kind of simpler, kind of like similar to what the Big Ten and Pac-12 were having with the Rose Bowl. But is this something that is viable, that maybe might be of interest to a network like ESPN, or what do you foresee about that?
It's conceivable. And I think one thing they talked about too was potentially getting Pac-12 content onto the ACC network. I don't know. I think it's certainly a possibility. I would think, like a conference championship game between the ACC and Pac-12 might be something that people be interested in. But I guess the bigger question is how is that going to help you catch up with the SEC and the Big Ten? And if it's getting to a point, you can see certainly just given the disparity in revenues, and plus the fact that the Pac-12 has obviously lost two of its most prominent members, that the appeal and strength of that brand is lessened, and so it's and maybe it helps because it's giving the SEC, or excuse me, ESPN another big game that it can broadcast, but I don't know if that's necessarily the kind of it doesn't sound like a magic bullet, I guess, and I kind of to go back to what I was saying. I think they're just trying to figure out what options do we have. Obviously, they can't go to the Big Ten or the SEC and say, hey, what do you think about our two conference champions play each other? So maybe it's one of those things, that this is possibly an option, but yeah, so it's a possibility, I guess, but I don't know that it's something that's going to solve a great deal of problems.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ken, I'm going to end this interview by asking this question regarding, the conversation you and I exchanged regarding the overall state of the industry, where AAPI people have not really been, well represented. You've stated about it. When I lived in Atlanta for a few years, having followed you and your colleague Rodney Ho, who also is an entertainment reporter with the AJC.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, in the South, there's been a problem with the racial inequality, injustice, and representation.
Right.
We won't touch too much about the obviously the shooting, the spa shooting in Atlanta about a year and a half ago. It impacted many of us all across the country, and I wanted to know from your personal experience, covering, sports in the South, where's the state of the industry right now, and what do you want to do, and what do you want to see in terms of greater representation of our, AAPI, writers, reporters, and what needs to be done, from your perspective?
Boy, that's a big question.
I know, a loaded question, but I apologize. No.
It's one that should be asked. Obviously, I think when I think about the state of journalism, and maybe sports journalism in particular, when you look around the room at a press conference or whatever, it's you wish, for a lot of reasons, but you wish that there was more different types of faces and names and men and women and so forth. And so often when you go places, it's mostly white men, and certainly I count a lot of really good people in that group, and who are a lot of really, really good reporters. But certainly I think there's a lot of value in having people with different backgrounds and experiences and ideas covering the same thing. I think it can only serve to enrich the reporting that's done, not just at our paper or even within print, but wherever, whether it's TV or radio or websites or whatever. I think we're all served when more people are bringing a wider background of like I was saying, histories and stories and viewpoints. But as far as how that changes, I think there's probably a lot of different. It probably at a lot of different levels. It needs to be addressed. I think probably just to go back to the very beginning of, for instance, when I was in college, I guess I'm just coming out. I wanted to do this. And one of the people that I looked to was someone at the Washington Post named David Nakamura, who was a Japanese American.
Yes.
Who is a Japanese American. So he was at that point. I think he was covering Maryland, and now he covers. Well, he was covering the White House. He's gone on to much bigger and better things.
Yes.
But so I reached out to him, and not even knowing him, but just knowing that hey, his name is like mine, and so we must have something in common. And he became something of a mentor to me. And so part of it is having people out there that you can look to and say, okay, as a kid or as a high school or college student, that there's people like me in this business, and that's hopefully that serves as an encouragement. But then too, it certainly goes to people that are doing the hiring, that challenging them to. And I think the AJC is, over its history, since I've been there, has done a good job of making sure that we have a diverse newsroom of people from not just in terms of race and ethnicity and gender and where people grew up. And so certainly that's certainly an issue. And then also too, or part of the solution. And then too, I think it falls on people like us to look out for the next generation. And if you see someone that's younger or whatever, or notice a name or whatever it is, or see someone say, hey, how can I help? And I tried to do that, not just specifically with AAPI reporters or writers. I've done that through like the Asian American Journalists Association, but even just the interns that come through the paper. I certainly remember, when I was their age, in college or just out of not knowing my way entirely, and I remember particularly also just how much I appreciated and looked up to the staff writers at the papers I was working at, and the ones that like for instance people at the AJC when I was just starting out. And so I've I don't know how good or bad a job I've done of that, but I've tried to make a point of with the interns at the paper in the summer, in sports particularly, of trying to make sure that I'm helping them and saying, hey, I'd love to read your story, or I like this story, work on this next time, whatever it is, but just trying to be a resource. So those are, I don't know that I'm necessarily giving you any great, insightful solutions, but I think it's, it's a lot of some of those things of making sure that there are people in place that people can see and say, okay, there's someone that looks like me that's doing my job, and maybe there's a place for me too because of that. And then also, at the hiring level of being committed to looking maybe at places we haven't looked for different sorts of people with different backgrounds. And then also, and like I was saying, it falls on us too to make sure that we're doing our part to encourage and to help grow the kids, the people that are coming up after us.
And that's one of the reasons why we do this show, Ken, is to show the next generation that, yes, there are Asians out there. There are people in the API community that are covering sports. And that's why we have this show. And we love to have people like you on, just to let them know that you can do this for a living, and you don't have to be go to something else. If you love sports or you love the sports media, you can absolutely do this. And so that's why we love having you on, and we appreciate you coming on with us.
Oh, well, thank you. I wish I thought of that, but that makes perfect sense. And hopefully someone out there is thinking, well, if Ken Sugiura can do this, I can do a much better job than he can. And hopefully that person will be coming up after us. But I thank you for having me on. It's been a real privilege and pleasure.
Ken, thank you very much.
Ken. Thank you so much for coming on tonight to discuss about the college football realignment and everything. And we wish you continued success and, covering the Georgia Tech this upcoming year and beyond as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
And the AA team will return after this brief break. Stick with us.
All right, Ken. Thank you so much for coming on with us.
Yeah, thank you guys. Anytime.
Okay.
All right, take care.
And best of luck.
All right, thanks.
I'm back with you.
All right. All right. Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. And welcome back to the Double A team. Ken Fang returning from hiatus. My name is Stephen Nagishi, and we want to thank Ken Sugiura from Atlanta Journal-Constitution, for joining us to discuss about the Georgia Tech, ACC, and the wild college football realignment, and having somebody like Ken discuss his perspective. Living in Atlanta, which is a college football capital of the world, was a tremendous voice, and we certainly appreciate him coming on to discuss that with us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, and of course, as you mentioned, it's a wild west situation with college football. We don't even know what's going to be happening next week. We don't even know what schools are going to be around in which conference. Obviously, geographical boundaries make no sense anymore. It used to be like you knew where the ACC was, you knew where the Big East was, you knew what the SEC had, and where the Big 12 and the Big 10. But now with schools going all over the place and it's all money involved, Stephen, it's just insane.
Right. It's not just football. It's other minor sports that also get impacted because of the time zone differences and the traveling and everything. So I'm curious to see if this is going to work, and hopefully the money that obviously the college football and basketball garners will be distributed to the lesser sports, and athletes who are not given the proper recognition are treated much better because of the what I just mentioned, the traveling and the time zone involved. Going from East Coast to West Coast, that's just taxing on your body.
Yeah, and of course you've got the Olympic sports with the colleges that are going to be suffering the most, because you're going to have like UCLA having to go to Penn State for Olympic sports, for track meet, or for rowing, or for baseball, or some of the other minor sports. So it's going to be interesting, as you mentioned, to see how this all happens. Football, of course, is driving the train because they make the most money, and the money is there. But it's all going to be about the Olympic sports and how they're going to have to travel. That's why we had these geographical boundaries with these conferences, Stephen, because it made it easier in travel. Sure. But now you have the West Coast schools, UCLA and USC, they're going to have to travel to the Big Ten. We'll see what definitely happens. Stephen, who do we have for our next guest?
Well, our next guest is a very good friend of mine that I met in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He's a legend in the local radio scene. He and his longtime friend Ben Rogers currently host the Ben and Skin Show on 97.1 the Eagle, which is a rock station. But he's also been a sideline reporter with the Dallas Mavericks with their network television. The one and only Jeff Skinwade is joining us And hey, Skin, how are you?
Steven, it's good to catch up with you. Ken, I've been backstage watching the previous segment, and I'm enjoying what you guys are doing very much.
Thank you. I know you've been waiting there, listening to us for pretty much the whole duration of our interview with Ken Sugiura from the AJC. So I appreciate your patience.
It's good. Ken was a good guest, man. I was engaged. I liked it.
Thank you so much, sir.
You bet.
Appreciate it. All right, so Skin, I met you, at the a lot of remotes when you were still working for, back then, what was 105.3 The Fan, which is a big, sports radio station in the DFW. You are very approachable, and we kind of got to know each other very, very well through these remotes, and we exchanged text messages, et cetera, et cetera. For those of us who are new to you, obviously Ken's also new to you as well. Give us kind of like a brief introduction of where you were, how you got your career in the radio in the DFW area. I know you started out as a rapper, that you formed with your longtime radio partner, Ben Rogers.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, Ben and I have known each other since we were 12, and we're in our early 50s now. So we've known each other and been friends and, done various endeavors. Even if you don't know the DFW media scene, there's a legendary sports station called The Ticket. That's,
Right.
you know, it's over 25 years old now. They've won 4 Marconis for Sports Station of the Year. And Ben and I got in over there in the early 2000s hosting the Dallas Mavericks postgame show. And so we, you know, being on a station that was that prominent really helped us increase like a local profile, I would say, and created other opportunities for us. And ultimately, you know, we got a full-time job in radio in 2008. But during that time period, you know, Dirk Nowitzki was such a popular player. There was a lot of interest in following his career and learning more about him. And so we were in a position as knowledgeable basketball people to, I mean, we didn't even realize we were doing it, but we were taking advantage of that situation because there was a lot of ears and eyeballs on us. And the other thing that was very different back then is the amount of internet information that was out there on the collective bargaining agreement in the NBA. It wasn't like it is now where you had Larry Coons, you know, frequently asked questions about the NBA salary cap, or there's a lot of guys that have created media entities out of that. Very early in that process, I was very knowledgeable about that. And so you would have, like, Steven, I know you spent a lot of time in Chicago, you know, you have Sam Smith going, well, I think you should trade this guy for this guy. And I'm like, well, you can't even do that under the collective bargaining agreement. So the idea of media experts, you know, it very quickly people reveal what they do and they don't know. And so I think the early stages of that, you know, Ben and I were able to utilize that to our advantage. And so ultimately, Mark Cuban, you know, understood what we did and appreciated it. And when he wanted to add a different element to the broadcast in 2009, they tabbed me, which was a very unconventional choice. Mm-hmm. I did not play college or pro basketball. I never played after high school, but I had a strong knowledge base. And because of our, you know, appearance on the ticket, fans knew who we were. And so I was able to parlay that into a little bit of an NBA broadcasting career at the same time that the Ben and Skin show started to take off. We were at ESPN radio when the Rangers went to back-to-back World Series and the Mavericks won a NBA championship sandwiched between that. So over a 13-month period, Ben and I were on the road. We were at every playoff game home and away for 2 World Series runs and an NBA championship. So that was the early days of Twitter. We built up a following. So we were really guys that were local DFW guys that were just in the right place at the right time and intuitive enough to take advantage of the new media that was happening with Twitter and social media and stuff like that. And, you know, now here we are. We've been doing full-time radio for 14 years, and I've been working for the Mavericks for 13 or whatever it is. And you look back and go, man, that happened really, really fast.
Yes, indeed.
Speaking with Jeff Skinwade of 97.1 The Eagle, as you can see, he's a co-host of the Ben and Skin Show and also a sideline reporter with the Mavs. Skin, let's talk about radio. As someone who has radio in my blood and have been in radio for a long time,
yeah.
How important is it to have a local show to spend time to talk about local sports teams? We've seen radio going to this horrible homogenized, going national with a lot of the sports radio stations. So how important is it to have a local sports show to engage the fans?
Yeah, you know, I think it's critical, Ken, and I don't think it's even just sports. I mean, sports is a big part of it. You know, I always kind of made this joke, you know, the people that are really, really caring about national sports are either college kids or gamblers. Most people have like very regional sort of tastes for their sports. They like their local teams. And if you're really into the sport, you're definitely going to know about the division that your team is in and then maybe the conference. And then, you know, so I'll give you an example. I'm an NBA guy. I know, even if I'm not broadcasting, I know every team inside out. My dad was a coach. It's in my blood. But I don't know Major League Baseball that way. I keep up with the AL West because the team I pull for, the Texas Rangers, are in it. I keep up with the American League. And then I follow the more interesting stories in the National League as well. But I'm not as passionate about baseball as I am basketball. I think that's true of most sports fans. They know about their teams and then what relates to their teams, right? And then I think also the advent of fantasy football has made everyone, an NFL expert to some degree in their own mind. But I think the key word you said is local. There's always going to be a desire to know what is happening in your community. And I think as local radio figures out what it is, I think that is the focus for all radio. Whether I think music radio, I believe, is really the thing that's got to shift and figure it out the most. I think as long as talk radio has an element that is local, they'll always have an audience, so long as the people that are on the air are entertaining and are good at their job. So, there's a lot of hand wringing and consternation over the future of radio. Certainly music radio, I think, has some serious issues to figure out. But I think talk radio, whether it's sports, political, community, humor, whatever, I think there's always going to be a place for that. And I think people tend to care about their community first before other things.
And, you said you became a sideline reporter despite not having like a basketball experience in college nor pro. I'm very curious to know, for somebody who normally becomes a sideline reporter, normally we see a lot of female reporters. Mm-hmm. But in your case, with no professional basketball experience, what kind of advantage or disadvantage did you have to face, when you move up in the ranks of being a sideline reporter as you gain experiences?
Yeah, so my situation is very, very unique in that I don't even really do what a sideline reporter does. When and the other thing too is, and please understand, I'm not hyping myself up here, but because I grew up the son of a coach, I speak basketball parlance. When I was in high school, I coached at basketball camps. I refereed games. So I grew up with basketball, so I can speak it to a degree of authority because that's how I was raised. So if I'm around people that work in the game, the nicest thing that ever happened to me in terms of professionally feeling validation is I was in a unique situation where I was standing there talking to Mark Cuban and Jeff Van Gundy. And Cuban turned to Van Gundy and said, he actually knows what he's talking about. And that was his way of telling Van Gundy he's one of us. And that was incredible validation. I mean, because I really admired Jeff Van Gundy. He's a very smart basketball person. Absolutely. That felt amazing. And so that I definitely, the first 2 or 3 years I was on the air, guys, and that's early on in social media, people were destroying me. And it was very bad for my self-confidence because I was like, oh, my God, I didn't realize I was so terrible. Well, I mean, over time, I come to learn that's the social media experience, and you have to separate those things. I had other things happen later in my life that made me feel validation. But to your point, when I was first added to the broadcast, there was actually still a sideline reporter, Emily Jones, who's now a huge part of the Ranger organization. She was still doing that job, and we were suddenly a 3-man booth. And because what I was doing was so unconventional, and you couldn't go on the air and go, here's an analyst that didn't play college or pro basketball, they kind of positioned me like my first time on the broadcast, I was standing under the basket. But I never went and talked to never stuck my head in the huddle or do the things a sideline reporter does. I was a second analyst. And I think like the way they positioned me, I looked like a sideline reporter, but in this scenario, I'm neither fish nor fowl. I'm just this really unique thing. And honestly, I don't think I would have ever had this opportunity if it wasn't for Bill Simmons. And what I mean by that is if you look at Bill Simmons' rise to sports credibility, he's just a dude with opinions. However, he positioned them in a way where it's like suddenly people looked at him like he was some sort of a basketball expert. And what made him a basketball expert was his passion for the game. That dude didn't hoop, but he built up a following. And then his following became so influential, the part of the basketball establishment had to start acknowledging him and interacting with him. And he became a big part of ESPN basketball. And my point is that I think Cuban saw how people reacted to Bill Simmons and wanted some sort of a local version of that. And so I, again, right place, right time. The music stopped, and I was the guy with the chair. And so I feel very blessed and very lucky to have had this opportunity. I don't feel like I'm any better than anybody else or that I deserved it, but I do feel like when I got the opportunity, I did my job, and I'm still here. But I'm very lucky. I was in the right place at the right time, and everything sort of, this confluence of events worked together to where I ended up on the Mav broadcast. And it, of course, helped mine and Ben's radio show as well quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. And how important is it, as you mentioned, being part of that local radio broadcast, being helped, and you're a known entity. It's not like you came in and from New York, where I'm sure Dallas fans would not appreciate that anyway. But
Right.
you're someone who's local. You have that credibility with the fans, and even though, of course, the social media backlash, you still at least were able to go on there and at least talk some knowledge about the team. And of course, you have that Mark Cuban influence as well, being able to say, "Hey, look, he's on there, whether you like it or not." But at least you have that confidence, and he had that confidence in you to do that.
Yeah, a couple of things happened that were really huge in that regard. Obviously, having the support of the owner is really big, but I did have the good fortune. My radio partner, he actually comes from a marketing background, marketing and advertising, and he's a genius in that regard. And I remember when we first got the Mavs postgame gig, they would run like 5 or 6 promos a day. That tonight after the Mav game, tune in to Ben and Skin for the Mavs postgame show. And he was like, "Do you understand how much this advertising would cost if we were to go and buy it?" And no, I had no idea. And so just them going on this very popular station and saying Ben and Skin 6 times a day, that's a branding component that let the DFW area know who Ben and Skin were. So again, I'm getting the advantage of this without even knowingly saying this is what our plan is. It's just kind of like, oh my, I guess we Forrest Gumped it in a lot of ways, right? But I do feel confident that when I did talk basketball, I spoke it from a position of authority, which is what Cuban got behind. He didn't get behind me as some clown or something. He was like, "Hey, this guy's funny, but he actually knows his hoops." And quite frankly, and I saw the email, when I was added to the broadcast, one of the things that Cuban said in the email to the producer is, "There's nobody else in Dallas that can do what he does." Now, I'm sure there were others, but they weren't in the position I was in at the time, right? And so I've always said, as soon as they replace me, I'm not going to complain. I've been on an incredible ride. I've been really, really fortunate. And I will get replaced. We all get replaced in media. Hopefully it's not too soon for my sake. But if they do, I won't have a single complaint, man. I've been on a really good ride here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
If I could
Speaking
just
of
say
being
one
on
thing.
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, if I can just say one thing, you're not Jeff. I think Skin. I think this from experiences also in yourself as in radio. You're not trustworthy in radio unless you've been fired at least once. I have been fired twice in radio, so I'm very trustworthy.
Wow.
Right. Oh yeah, we've had multiple locations and stops along the way. Steven can tell you that.
Yeah. And I was going to transition into that. Sorry about that, Ken. We're speaking with Jeff Skinwood, my good friend from 97.1 the Eagle out in Dallas, Fort Worth. You left 105.3 The Fan, and which is a Cowboys flagship station as well as the Rangers.
Right.
And you left to go to 97.1 The Fan, which is a iconic rock station.
Yes.
And you talk about being on a good run. You joined the station, I believe, around February of 2020.
Yep.
After a non-compete clause ended, and and then the pandemic really happened several weeks or about a month later.
Right.
I wanted to know what made you decide to leave all sports station and go to a rock station, and what was the mindset that forced you and Ben to kind of, adjust during these, difficult times?
Yeah. Number one, when we went to the station, they had another afternoon talk show that had been very popular in the DFW area for decades called the Russ Martin Show. And so those guys didn't play any rock music. They did talk, and they did their own brand of talk. But we knew that if we were to go over there, they would allow us to do the same thing. And a new company had bought CBS Radio called Odyssey. And, whenever there's a new takeover or whatever, you have these new executives that come in and they have very strong ideas. And so we were the afternoon drive show, and our contract was up in May. And I felt like they were negotiating with us in poor faith because, you don't in radio, you don't go in and look at monthlies, especially in Dallas, Texas. Your ratings in football season are always going to be way higher. And so these new people were saying, and one of the things about me and Ben, it's probably because of Ben and his advertising background, we always make a lot of money for the radio station we work for, regardless of ratings, because we are good at, connecting with the advertisers and our listeners. Stephen will tell you our listeners are very loyal, and they take their patronage to these people that advertise with us, our partners and sponsors. And so they were trying to negotiate with us in what I considered poor faith, because if you looked at the yearly trends, you're not going to sign a contract with us in April when the ratings dip. You're going to it's okay. Well, if my contract is up in October, you're going to overpay me when we're top 3, right? We all know it's because of the football season. And so we were negotiating, and they were like, well, okay, we're going to move you guys to midday. Usually if you go from afternoon drive to midday, that's the precursor to your exit. Exactly. So we got very proactive about what is our future? What do we want to do? The Eagle was dying to have us because when we walk in the door, we walk in with a lot of money. And so we did that, and we got lucky. The pandemic's horrible, but for us, it was fortuitous because when sports went away, everyone listened to us. And we had a run where for, I think it was 5 months, the Ben and Skin show in our time period beat The Ticket, The Fan, and ESPN combined. All 3 of those combined, we were kicking their ass, just to be crass. And it felt really, really good. Now, right now, our ratings are not good. It's kind of been riding the wave a little bit. But our advertisers are very happy because when they advertise with us, their phones ring and they make money. The rating system is a flawed system, but it's what we have to deal with. And so if you pound your chest when you're number 1, well, then you better owe some people some apologies when you fall out of the top 10, right? So we don't focus on that. We focus on our content, the listeners that we build up, and people that advertise on our show. They do very, very well, and that's sustainable. And so we feel like we're in a really good position where we're at. And then the Mavericks, ESPN went away in our market, and the Mavericks came over to our station. So now we're there with the Mavericks, who we have an amazing relationship with. So it's been really good for us.
We're speaking with Jeff Skinwade, Dallas Sports Radio, and of course he's on the Eagle right now, a rock station, and we're talking about one of my favorite topics of local radio, and talking about how flawed the rating system is and everything. You're speaking my language, Skin. You really are speaking my language. But the fact is that, as you mentioned, you're part of the Mavericks broadcast. You also have the Mavericks there, and you're also doing the post-game show. So how is it important to have all that linked together? And also, as your partner, as you mentioned, is a great marketing guy who knows all this, how much that branding is part of it. So how much is that part to be linked with the Mavericks all the way through from basically all these different platforms? How big is it for your show?
It's huge. I mean, it's a massive part of our identity. And quite frankly, I think it makes Ben and I unique because what everybody wants to be associated with here in Dallas is the Cowboys. And that's great. I mean, it's a this massive entity and monster and all of that. But I think it's better for me and Ben, our personalities and also our individual identity, to be more associated with the Mavericks than the Cowboys or the Rangers. And we're obviously big fans of those teams. I know the least about hockey, and it's hard for me to get knowledgeable about hockey because it happens the same time the NBA happens. And I am completely immersed in NBA basketball. In fact, I don't watch near as much college basketball as I used to because I'm so ensconced in the NBA. And so it's hard to keep up with all of it. But it's been good for our own personal individual identity to be so affiliated with the Mavericks. And the Mavericks love it too. I mean, whether it's Mark Cuban or it's the people on the sales side or whatever, they love Ben and Skin because they know we're going to talk Mavericks basketball, and they know that we're going to be champions for their franchise because we're just so emotionally attached to it. So it's been, I think Ben would say the same. I think it's been great for our identity, and especially to have been there during Dirk's run. It was just extraordinary because he's one of the most beloved athletes by any community. And, you look at all these different teams and different sports. I could argue that Dirk is as beloved by the Dallas community as any other professional athlete is as loved in his community because his story is so unique.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't go on your interview without talking about, obviously you began your career as what you and Ben like to describe as a washed up rapper. But from that point on, you've, gotten involved with the local music scene. You have your own record label. You have a truly a wonderful endeavor called Truth to Power Project, which you talk a lot on your radio station before. Can you explain to us about how it happened, who's involved, and why it happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always, when we got into full-time media, I had this side business, a music production company. That was what I thought was going to be my full-time job. And then the media thing took off. But as part of that music production company, we would create music and they would basically get sold into this bigger company that would place it in, commercials and TV and things like that. And so I learned a lot about the music business that way. And I've always had a passion for the music business. And as we, as I got older and had different things going on, one of my really good buddies owns the biggest record store in America. It's called Josie Records, and massive square footage at 4 locations. And we had always talked about doing a record label. And so we started a record label really kind of, I don't want to say as a hobby because we know what we're doing from a business standpoint, but it was like a little side thing that we wanted to do. And then as soon as we launched it, the pandemic hit. And so that kind of shelves your touring plans and all that kind of stuff. This band was going to go tour. Well, then in the throes of the pandemic and all the uncertainty, when George Floyd was murdered, there was obviously a lot of additional angst for people aside from how they were already feeling paranoid and disenfranchised and some of those things that the pandemic was causing for a huge number or a massive part of our country. A lot of people that was amplified when George Floyd was murdered. And so there was a lot of, I know for a lot of people, there was an urge or a feeling to get involved and do something because people were tired of watching this. And, for me, I come from a suburb where my graduating class was probably 70% white, I'm guessing, and then 30% other, which would Hispanic and African-American and Asian American, right? It's like, oh, you're not white, you're other, right? And there's this like one sliver of this. And so when I left high school and me and Ben got involved in the local rap scene, we were very suddenly very much, we were the other. Like we were in the small minority. And that's a really amazing thing to go through. Now, I had already been kind of going through that because, if you play basketball, your goal is to play in the games that the black dudes are playing in because those are the best games and you want acceptance from them. So, growing up loving basketball and rap, I very much wanted acceptance from people that were excellent at the things that I admired. And so as I further endeavored into that, you learn more about people that are unlike you. And the experience of music and sports being such a big part of my life, you see excellence happen when people put whatever their backgrounds and differences are aside and find commonalities and work together. And it's I've always been amazed by a football locker room. I've always thought it's the most amazing thing in the world because there's so many different ways in which people are segregated. They're segregated by race. They're segregated by upbringing. They're segregated by socioeconomic background. They're segregated by what side of the ball they play on. They're segregated by individual position group. It's amazing how all these little microcosms function. And then on any given snap, there's 11 guys that all have to do the same thing under pressure for it to not be a penalty. I've always thought pro football is just astonishing in that regard, and a really great example of what happens when people buy into a singular concept, despite what their backgrounds are. And so when you see it work in sports and you see it work in music, you're inspired by those things. And so we had just started our record label, and my partner, Luke, was like, well, we should donate money to Black Lives Matter. And I was like, well, we should do more than that, because quite frankly, I don't really know what Black Lives Matter is. I know that the social media aspect of it is something that we align ourselves with and something that we believe in, but structurally, I don't understand what it is. So why don't we involve ourselves in local nonprofits here in Dallas that are already doing that work? And I went to the Mavericks because they're an organization that is about these things, got their support. I went to Universal Music because of an affiliation there. They're about these things. And we just jumped feet first into this project and got amazing support in the first year. Despite all of our concerts being canceled, we raised $65,000 in our first year just off of record sales. And we have big plans that we want to continue, because what we want to do is we want it to be a cultural endeavor that people find themselves invested in, the way sports and music and community can work together and continually. We're not the nonprofit. We're the vehicle to get people engaged. And it's, we got sidetracked by COVID, and I had some health issues that sidetracked us, but man, we're starting to get our momentum back. And my dream is for other cities to look at it and go, let's do this with the Atlanta Hawks, or let's do this with the Houston Texans, or whatever, because people come together through music and sports. They always have. And if we can use those platforms to get people to care about folks in their community that don't have their upbringing or don't look like them, then we're doing something important. And that's where we wanted to put our energies, and we will continue to do that, because I very much believe in learning about people that have different backgrounds to really help you learn a lot about yourself. I've learned so much about myself through interacting with people who have different cultures and backgrounds than I have.
We're speaking with Jeff Skin Wade of 97.1 The Eagle. Skin, we've talked about everything about radio. We talked about your background. We've talked about your career. But one thing we haven't talked about is the Mavericks. So let's talk a little bit about the team. So
yes.
What do you see that their needs are for the upcoming season? I know that they had some good stuff with Luka Doncic going in, but what do they need for this upcoming season to improve?
Well, I feel like, and I know people are not agreeing with this because they lost Jalen Brunson, who was their second leading scorer and arguably their second best player, but they've addressed a need up front with the addition of Christian Wood and JaVale McGee, and that was a huge need. And whereas Jalen Brunson is a very different player than Tim Hardaway Jr., I would argue that just in raw production, even in a down year, Tim Hardaway Jr. is going to give you 14 a game in a down year. So I feel like they're a better team than they were last year just by getting Tim back and adding JaVale McGee and Christian Wood. Now, what they really need to put them over the top is they need a player that is 6'5" to 6'8" that can defend, but can also create some offense. One of their problems in the past has been too many one-way players. Right. All right. Tim can shoot, but he's not going to do anything off the dribble, and he's a mediocre defender. Or boy, Jalen can create, but he's an undersized guy playing off of Luka. That's not ideal. We love Dorian. We love Reggie, but man, they can't floor the ball, and you have to create for them. They need to really get over the top. They need to add a guy, and I'm not even talking about an all-star, but hey, that would be awesome. But they need a guy that's a two-way player that they can go across the board, and their smallest player on the floor is 6'5", and they can switch all of those picks and off the ball stuff, and it makes it easier to defend. So that's the goal. I personally adore Jalen Brunson. I think he's a wonderful dude. I love everything he gave to the Dallas Mavericks. What an incredible opportunity. Don't begrudge this man. He had to sacrifice to find a role for the Mavericks. He's a point guard, and he didn't have the ball. That's not ideal for him. And quite frankly, that's not ideal for the Mavericks either. So, they're tough. It's tough with their salary cap scenario. You can't just go replace it, but they couldn't be in a situation where they had Jalen Brunson making $27 or $28 million, because at that point, his value as an asset plummets, and he doesn't really fit what you need. So that's tough. That hurts. That is a setback, but it's not so debilitating. They've taken this massive step back. The next move they make, that will be to add that guy that can play alongside Luka, initiate when he doesn't have the ball, and then they don't get their tails handed to them on defense because they're undersized or the guy's the sieve, right?
Right. Well, we got a couple more questions, and we'll try to wrap it up with my good friend Ben, Jeff Skinwade from 97.1 The Eagle. We'll talk about, you have a nephew who's a rising star in the Hollywood movie scene.
Yeah.
And, you were kind enough to share about his latest film, Cha-Cha Real Smooth. Tell us about the film, and how proud of your nephew, Cooper Raiff, who is a director, writer, and also starring in this movie, and his rising career.
I'm giddy, and I can't stop smiling and talking about him and all those things. It's, there's so many talented people in the world, and it's hard to get your work seen or heard or any of that type of stuff. And before I go further, am I allowed to cuss on this broadcast?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Go ahead.
So this is his second movie.
There's no FCC rules.
Okay, his first movie was called Shithouse, and it was a very small, what they call a micro budget indie, and he made it right before the pandemic. And I think it's a really smart, funny film about a college kid that is really struggling to fit in. And he did such a good job with it. He wasn't originally going to direct it. They just couldn't find a director. So he did it out of necessity. And he didn't know how to edit, and he edited out of necessity. But when that happened, I just thought that was the hugest thing ever. And I told him, I was like, Cooper, the vast majority of creatives are going to create something and no one sees it but their family and friends. You've made this movie that went to South by Southwest, and IFC picked it up, and you've already done something that 99% of the population will never be able to, 99% of creatives will never be able to achieve that. And then I'll be damned if this thing didn't triple that. I mean, the movie was so well received that people wanted to work with him. And so one of those people was Dakota Johnson. Obviously she can, this was actually the first movie that her film company has ever produced, but they reached out and they said, what do you have? And he said, well, I'm kind of working on this loose idea, which was what became Cha-Cha Real Smooth. And he was writing it for someone else to be in. And she insisted on him acting in it, because that's part of his appeal. So he didn't have any intention of acting and writing and directing in this. It just worked out for him that way. And it's been really well received. The movie has made money for the people that made it, which is a huge thing in that business. If you're creating works and then they're making money, they're going to give you more work. And so his movies are, I would say they're very sweet-natured, optimistic. They're mostly, he's kind of a hopeless romantic. They're not straight out comedies, but they have a lot of funny elements, but they're stories about just normal people trying to work their way through everyday life. As he might say, I made another lame talkie movie. There's not a lot of, you're never going to have anybody jumping out of a moving car or anything like this. They're movies about people. And he's very intuitive about human interaction and human relationships, I think, beyond his years. And he wants to tell stories about people finding their way. And I just, I've seen it like 7 times now, and I'm biased as hell, but it still holds up. And there's enough people out there in the industry that give him accolades that lets me know that I'm not being just the proud uncle or whatever. And his next movie is it's called Trashers, and it's the story of the minor league hockey team that the mobster Jimmy Galante bought for his son. It's a big, giant, $30 million production with David Harbour from Stranger Things is playing Jimmy Galante. And so he just keeps doing these bigger and bigger things, and we're just all sitting back in astonishment and soaking it all in. It's very, very, it's very fun.
For disclosure purposes, I do work for Apple and Providence Place, but it is one of the things we have on the screen on our store. So it's a very Cha-Cha Real Smooth is getting some good promotion from Apple and in the stores. So Skin, I think you'll be very proud to know that it's on one of our reels that we have on for Apple TV Plus. And plus, when the fact that it's such a great cast, you have Leslie Mann also in it. You saw the trailer running, also Brad Garrett along with Dakota Johnson. So this is a real big time movie, and for Apple TV to put their muscle behind it, I think it's a great thing.
I do too, man. I'm so excited. And so this movie is not autobiographical, but he takes elements from his own life. But in a lot of ways, I'm watching this movie in which Leslie Mann is kind of playing my sister, because she's Cooper's mom in the movie. And I'm like, man, this is just a really fun, unique thing that's going on. But yeah, you can't imagine how proud we are.
And it's not bad to have Leslie Mann playing your sister. I don't think it's a bad thing.
She's and Cooper, he had this really funny story about the first scene he shot with her, because he's acting, but he's also directing. And he said the scene ended and he was just kind of like staring at her like, wait, what, is she supposed to say something to me, or do I say something to her? It's Leslie Mann. And he was like, man, she's just the sweetest, most genuine person. And so, you love hearing that these people that you've watched all these years are actually wonderful people too. So it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. I hate to change the subject like this way, but there was the radio community is very, very tight and in Dallas. And the Texas Rangers, and I know that you tweeted about this as well. They lost their radio network engineer, Ted Nicholas Payne, all of a sudden. And I know that a lot of people in the Dallas radio community know him so well. And his passing, I'm sure, was a shock to the radio community and you as well.
Yeah, it's really difficult for a lot of people. And, we worked with him very closely for, I guess that was 8 years while we were at the Fan, and we traveled with him a bunch, Ken, because, you go to the Super Bowl, or you go to Oxnard for Cowboys camp, or we would go to Arizona for Rangers. And, sometimes we would rent houses and live in the same house for a week at a time, and so he was the head engineer for the Texas Rangers as well as the Dallas Cowboys. And so, you can go and see literal Hall of Famers like Eric Nadel or Brad Sham. They're just devastated because he was such a lovely person and he was really good at his job. But he was just a genuine guy, and so he was only 56 and it was unexpected. And, it happened yesterday. And so we're still, trying to come to grips with it. But he was at KRLD, I believe, going back to the late 80s, I think is when he first started there. I know he's been doing the Rangers, I think since 96 is when he started doing that. But he just, radio lifer, zero, and I mean zero ego. If he had any, he hit it, and just cared. I'm sure, Ken, you've worked with people who don't really care about their job in radio. It's a paycheck. That ain't him. He took tremendous pride in what the radio station sounded like when he was in charge of these remotes or these sports broadcasts. And, working with someone who cares is always special. And then working with someone who's a good, genuine person is special. And then working with someone who is really, really, really good at their job was special. And so I'm echoing what, a ton of people in the DFW sports community are saying right now. He was a great, great guy.
Yeah, and I've seen the tweets from Jane Slater of NFL Network,
yeah.
who's a friend of mine, and Emily Jones, and of course you as well. And it just seems like this person was a salt of the earth, and our condolences go out to his family as well, because as you mentioned, it's you. People like that are rare to find in radio, and like you said, no ego, and they care about the on-air product more than they care about themselves, and that's something that you just really love to see when you work in radio.
Absolutely. And he was one of those guys that if you wanted to know something about him, you need to ask him, because he wasn't going to spend a lot of time talking about himself. Just a really, really great guy.
Absolutely. Jeff Skin Wade, I could talk to you for days. I think you've become a great friend here on the show, and we're definitely going to have you back talking about the Mavericks when we get closer to the season. I know you've been great friends with Steven, I'm going to definitely follow you on Twitter. So, just great stuff. We appreciate you coming on and talking about music, talking about your nephew's great movie, Cha-Cha Real Smooth, and the Mavs and radio in general. So, thanks very much for coming on.
You bet, man. And I'll follow you right back. And I'm excited about y'all's show. Steven was telling me about, the early days as y'all are getting this up and going. And I think it's needed. I think it's really cool. And any way that I can help, you guys just let me know.
Thank you, Skin. And we'll keep in touch again soon.
All right. Talk to you guys soon.
Take care.
Okay, talk to you later, Skin. And with the AA team, we'll wrap it up right after these messages. Thank you, Skin.
You bet. Thank you, guys. Y'all have a wonderful night. Steven, I'll talk to you soon, man.
All right. Say hello to Ben and everybody at the Eagle.
Absolutely. Will do. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
He was good.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm really glad that, he was able to come and share his career, everything.
All right, we'll wrap it up real quick, and you give it off to I think the White Sox.
The South Side Burbs, South Burbs Hitman. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
When we're ready.
All right, and we go in 3, 2, 1. All right.
So thanks to Ken Sugiura of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, talking about college football, and Jeff Skin Wade of 97.1 The Eagle in Dallas. Both fascinating guests, Stephen, and great stuff, and we thank them for coming on.
Absolutely. Another fantastic show. Ken was able to offer his perspective from living in Atlanta, college football capital of the world, about the upheaval in the college football world. And, Ken, you seem to have enjoyed the conversation with my friend Jeff Skin Wade from 97.1 The Fan, the Eagle in Dallas, as well as the Mavericks broadcast team. And another fantastic show. Obviously, Aldo was not here tonight. Obviously, he was on vacation, well-deserved vacation, I will add.
Of course, yes.
And,
trying to run the Barroom Network, you need a vacation.
Especially. And I had to do the, producing behind. So obviously there was no commercial breaks in between. So I apologize for anybody who was had to hear us talk in between. Hopefully Aldo will be able to work his magic editing and adding the videos even while he's away. So we're going to wrap up our show very shortly. South Burbs Hitman will be coming up shortly at the top of the hour.
Let's talk. Unfortunately, again, we've talked before about shootings on this show, and unfortunately, of course, what happened in the Chicago area in July 4th weekend. And then, of course, over the weekend, we had the shooting of Shinzo Abe, or Abe Shinzo, the former Japanese prime minister. I hate to talk about guns on this show, but it's just really sad what has happened over the last couple of weeks, Stephen. And I'm just very sad. My condolences to the Japanese community. I know that not many. I know Shinzo Abe was not popular among some, and this person who shot him, who admitted to shoot him, who admitted shooting him twice, was not a fan of his because of a connection with his mother to the Unification Church and allegedly donations that she made. that he said that was coming from Shinzo Abe. But still, you don't wish anything like that on anybody.
No, absolutely. And I spoke with you before the show. I was never that much of a fan of his policies, as well as the his party, the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan, which has ruled Japan for such a long, long time, except for a brief period of time when they did not have the power after losing in the election. But it just wasn't normal 4th of July where we all go out and celebrate and watch fireworks, and it's kind of sad that those things. Not that I'm saying we took it for granted, or we cannot even enjoy the 4th of July for what it is, unfortunately, and it's just so sad. And there are people out there, who are telling athletes and sports writers to shut up and dribble and stick to sports, et cetera. But if it happened to you and your family members, are you still willing to say that to the victims, as well as the the community who are suffering, like the nearby Highlands? That's unacceptable. We cannot accept it as a norm. And if it happens in countries like Japan, which gun violence is obviously very, very low at all, and like you said, I would never wish this on any enemy, no matter how bad that person is, because taking matters into your own hand with a violence like this is a threat to freedom of speech, as well as the democracy. You can't use a weapon or brutality to silence an opposition. We've come close to seeing that with the January 6th, shortly after the election, where we see the protesters getting killed, as well as the police officers, Capitol Hill police officers being killed, etc. Nobody wins in these types of moments, especially when you're trying to silence others because of the election outcome, which we won't get too much into it. But Aldo shared us on the Slack channel about him being so sick of these gun violence. And we had a very contested conversation between Aldo and John Santucci, who produces the Tuesday night show, with Ken Aguirre, after what happened to your aunt and uncle in California. Ken, I don't want to rehash any memories, but it's an issue that divides a lot of people, upsets a lot of people, angers a lot of people, no question, even if it's not one of your own, unfortunately. But something has to be done, and hopefully we start to take a good hard look at ourselves in the mirror going forward, because this should not be accepted as some sort of a normality in any shape or form. Absolutely.
And our condolences and our hearts go out to the victims of the Highland Park parade shooting, as so many people unnecessarily passed in that as well. You want to feel safe in going out to and celebrate July 4th, but when you get shootings like this, and also in Philadelphia the same day, and also other places as well, it's just not right. But again, it's not a debate that we can have here, but we just want to mention that it's senseless, and we certainly hope that it has to end. It just has to end. We're gonna have to end our show. We'll leave it there. Stephen, we'll be back in a couple of weeks, and who are we working on for our show?
Well, we are hoping to have somebody who's probably familiar with a lot of Chicagoans. Teddy Greenstein, former Chicago Tribune writer. We hope to having him, and we hope to have another guest on our show as well, just like we did tonight. So
yes, and we'll be back again in a couple of weeks. I'll be with you as well. No more absences for me. So so I'll be back with you in a couple of weeks. We will be back again at the today is what, the 11th, so we'll be back on the 25th. At 6:30, we are going to step aside because we are done with our allotted time with South Burbs Hitmen. Come up next here on the Barroom Network. Stephen, great job in getting the guests, and I appreciate your work, and appreciate you producing the show and pinch hitting for Aldo tonight. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.